whole life, I've been trying to watch my weight and be healthy, and I was really suffering. I would wake up feeling like an elephant was sitting on my chest, like I couldn't get a full breath in, and led me to a life of being in doctor's offices 12 to 20 times per year, having to take medications, having to give myself shots in the stomach every other day. It is really unbearable. It feels like a form of torture. I just was really at a loss. I was working out, I was eating whole foods, but I can't lose any weight. I don't know what to do. I was like, okay, my body's just rebelling on me, or my body hates me. And I was in this really dark place. I get emotional about it because it's really sad to see people suffering so much. We've been lied to. What we eat impacts our behavior. It impacts our ability to learn. There are solutions. We have solutions. We have so much control over how our health is manifesting. Our genes are not our destiny. I am now able to moderate, and I didn't think that I would be a moderator. So the other piece about this is that we can't wait for our doctors to catch this, because they are looking for the full-blown disease to be present, and then they can give you medications. That was not the life that I wanted to live anymore.
I just want to start with you giving some of your background to your story, because I personally have watched you tell your story and have been like, wow, you have a really good approach, an open-minded approach, but then also it's so relatable to so many people as to the things that you go through to try to overcome some of the different health implications that we run into that we may think are more like genetics. So could you just start by explaining some of your story and how you got to where you are today?
Sure, yeah. My story starts in childhood. I was a typical standard American diet eater. I grew up in the 80s and 90s where it was like, hey, don't have any fat at all whatsoever. So everything was packaged, processed carbohydrates and Eggo waffles and dinosaur egg oatmeal and granola bars and all these foods that they were all my favorites. And I, not surprisingly, struggled with having a lot of colds and ear infections, a lot of antibiotics and strep throat, and I had to get my tonsils out my senior year of high school because I got strep throat 6 times that year. I had so many rounds of antibiotics. And then when I went to college the following year, I started to develop asthma, and I was struggling with a lot of acne. I tried to go on the pill and it was horrible for me, and my acne got worse. I gained more weight. It was just a mess. So went off of that. And then I moved to Miami, Florida for grad school, and I also started to develop seasonal allergies, but season for allergies in Florida is all year round. So I, as it turns out, was allergic to basically every tree, grass, weed under the sun. I was allergic to different molds, and I felt like I needed to be in a bubble. And I was even allergic to palm trees, which felt like a cruel joke. And so I was taking tons of over-the-counter allergy medications, prescription medications for allergies and asthma, multiple inhalers, and I was also struggling with a lot of chronic sinus infections, and that meant more antibiotics, and the allergy medications make you so lightheaded and tired. Like, think about like Benadryl head, like that's what I felt like all the time. And I went to my doctor and I was like, why is this happening to me? I'm in my early 20s. Like, and they're like, oh, I guess it's just bad luck. It's bad genes. And I was like, that doesn't feel right. Like, it never sat with me. I was like, I was like, oh, I guess my grandma developed allergies later in life. So I guess that's what it is. But it just didn't feel like this was all I could be doing for it. So I ended up getting allergy shots, and that help to make you less and less sensitive and reactive to some of the things that you're allergic to. So I was allergic to so many things, so I needed 3 shots at a time. And I was starting to finally feel better after like a year of getting these shots. And then all of a sudden, I started getting allergies again. I was like, what's happening? And allergies, by the way, we say allergies and we don't really think about it. They're the most annoying thing that you get so itchy, your throat is itchy. Like, I wanted to like scratch my throat out, your eyes are itchy and watering. Like, it is really unbearable. Like, it's really it feels like a form of torture. Being itchy is very horrible. And so it's just like I wanted to like scratch my throat. I would wake up feeling like an elephant was sitting on my chest, like I couldn't get a full breath in. So I was really struggling with these things. And then, like I said, I started to develop more allergies because I wasn't healing the root cause. So I had to get two more shots. And so I was going broke on these copays for these allergy shots. And this was back in like 2009, and I don't think that they would let anyone do this now, but I was like, I'm working at a nursing facility. Can I have one of the nurses at this facility give me these shots because I'm like going broke on copays? And so they said yes, and I of course asked the nurse to teach me how to do it myself. And so then I was giving myself the allergy shots every other day, five of them in my stomach every other day. And this is my early 20s. Like I'm supposed to be, at the peak and vibrant and all these things. And I really just wasn't. And so I was really struggling. And by some miracle, there was a book that landed in my hand called The Paleo Diet Solution by Rob Wolf. And I was reading about this paleo diet, which, if you don't know, it's just an all real food diet. So it's cutting out basically everything I ate growing up, all the packaged processed foods, getting rid of these industrial seed oils like canola, corn, cottonseed, soy, sunflower, safflower, grapeseed, and rice bran. So getting out all of those oils, like I used to cook with canola oil. I was like, oh, this is a thing. Okay. So, and it basically taught me everything that we've been taught, kind of do the opposite. And so it was like, don't avoid red meat, embrace red meat. Don't avoid fat, embrace healthy fats. Don't avoid salt, embrace healthy mineral salt. And just reading it, it made so much sense to me because it harkened back to this more of ancestral way of humans eating. And so we evolved eating animal foods and meat and eating the whole animal and eating things that were unprocessed and denatured. We didn't evolve eating microwaved lean cuisines, which was a common staple in my diet. So, I was always looking out for trying not to have fat in my diet as the thing to try to keep me healthy. And then I also was trying to do like what I call now that conscious standard American diet. So where you're thinking you're being healthy, but it's still really the standard American diet. So things like eating brown rice instead of white rice or eating whole wheat bread instead of wheat bread. And I was always having whole grain granola bars instead of like a candy bar, but I was still always struggling. And so it just really opened my eyes. I mean, I wanted to shout this from the rooftops. And I was telling people who may not have been interested at the time because I was just so enthusiastic about it and really just felt so deeply moved and kind of really, really enraged actually by the fact that I felt like we have been lied to. Like my whole life, I've been trying to watch my weight and be healthy. And I was really suffering in my early 20s. And I was looking around me. And like I said, I was a speech therapist. I was working in a nursing facility at the time. And my patients were so sick. They were suffering so much. They had so many diagnoses. Every time I saw a patient, I had to do a chart review. I had to write down all their diagnoses, all their medications. I mean, it took hours just doing that. Like, people were not just like, oh, it's like, oh, they have a case of bronchitis and they're here. No, it was like bronchitis and high cholesterol and hypertension and diabetes and like all the things, like just the list of all these things. And it kind of showed me like that I was on, all these shots and all these medications. And I just saw this little dotted line to my future of being there, being in a nursing home, being unable to think clear thoughts, recall important memories, be able to move on my own or have the freedom to do what I want to do. And it was, you see all these people and they were, being fed like what I had to do was give people like pureed food and thick liquids because they had swallowing issues and worked with them on their cognition and they weren't oriented, meaning they didn't know their name or what year it was or where they were. And it was just every case was just so heartbreaking. And I was, I get emotional about it because it's really sad to see people suffering so much and seeing families lose like the patriarch of their family, or people, once a lawyer or a professional, and they're in bed and they're getting, cleaned by the nursing assistants. Like it was really, really hard to see this and to think that we've been lied to. Like their tray of food that they would get were like pancakes and a muffin and cereal with skim milk and coffee with sugar and orange juice. Like that's on on their breakfast tray. And it was just like I don't want to like be all conspiracy theorists, but like the 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 powers that be do not have our best interest at heart. And so I I really, took this paleo diet, I applied it to myself, and like magic, all of these things went away. Like my allergies went away. I never had another issue again until I was in a moldy house in Florida a couple of years ago, but that's whatever, since gone. But I don't have sinus infections anymore. I don't have tendonitis in my ankles anymore. Like who would have thought that my tendonitis was related to what I was eating? Oh, yeah, it was because it wasn't my foot structure. It was because I was inflamed and I had raging acne that got much better. And I had all these things start to really get better in my health. And it was just from changing what I ate. And I was, like I said, shouting this from the rooftops. I was so excited, so eager to share. Like, there's solutions. We have solutions. We have so much control over how our health is manifesting. Our genes are not our destiny. Our genes our genes load the gun, but the environment pulls the trigger, right? So we are not our genes. We are how our genes are expressing, and we have so much control over how our genes express. And just looking back at my nursing home days, and then I was also working as a pediatric speech therapist, looking at the other end of the spectrum of life and seeing all these little ones coming in with just all sorts of issues. And it's just like, their parents are doing the best they can, of course. And, a kid would come in with a McDonald's bag and screaming and thrashing and having tantrums. And people are not taught to see the connection. It's not the individual's problem. It's not an individual problem. It's a systemic thing. They have us where they want us. We're so disconnected from the food system and how what we eat impacts our behavior. It impacts our ability to learn. It impacts how our brain is functioning, all these things. So just seeing all these things just sort of line up in front of me, I just said that I want to do everything in my power to exercise every ounce of control that I have over my own health destiny. And what became central for me was that I wanted to feel good. And so if that meant not having some foods that I used to love, that was fine for me because I would inevitably, try some things and be like, whoa, that felt like, wow, I feel terrible. And it just made it this like easy, clear choice. Like, wow, the sacrifices I'm making now and the boundaries that I've set around food are really protecting me so I feel good and so I can live the life that I want. Like, who cares if I can't have a candy bar, whatever? Like, I'd much rather feel energized, feel in a good mood, have clear skin, like have clear, sharp mind, feel good, then eat the thing. And so once you feel that for yourself, because that like feeling it in your body, there's no better teacher than that experiential piece. It really becomes very self-perpetuating. So it's not like, oh my gosh, you're like, you're so strict, you have to give up all these things. It's like, no, I have so much to gain. Like, what do we have to gain? There's so much life to be lived out there. And so for me, eating the way that I had been led me to a life of being in doctor's offices like 12 to 20 times per year, having to take medications, having to give myself shots in the stomach every other day. Like that was not the life that I wanted to live anymore. So paleo was amazing. I loved it. I was super obsessed with all this health stuff, and I was reading all these blogs and listening to all these podcasts and just flying high on the paleo train. And then I had a really stressful year. And all of a sudden, I started to develop some symptoms that I had never had before. So I started to feel what people would describe as like adrenal fatigue. So I was just always exhausted. I would sleep until 11 a.m. when normally I was like up like a rooster with the sun. And I was just dragging all the time. And I stopped having a menstrual cycle for 6 months. I was putting on weight. I had worse acne than I had in my teens. And I was like, pump the brakes here. Like, what just happened? Because this diet just healed me. So now what's happening? I couldn't figure out what was happening. And it was very alarming because I knew that going back to what I was doing obviously wasn't the answer. So I did some Google searching and I found out that I probably had what's called polycystic ovarian syndrome or PCOS. About 1 in 5 women have this. And the information out there at the time was don't have refined sugar, don't have dairy, and don't have gluten. And I was like, oh, check, check, check. I'm doing all that because I'm doing paleo. So I just paleoed harder because I didn't know what to do. I was like, I guess I'm doing everything right already. But obviously, like something had to give. So obviously, since nothing changed, nothing changed. So I was really stuck. I just was really at a loss. I was working out, I was eating whole foods, I was doing all the things. And I was like, okay, my body's just rebelling on me, or my body hates me. And I was in this really dark place because out of any room I walked into, I was probably eating the textbook healthiest diet in the room. Yet I was overweight, riddled with acne, wasn't getting a cycle. When I did get a cycle, my PMS was so bad. I used to break up with whoever I was dating the week before my cycle because I had PMDD as well, which is like even worse PMS. It was just, I was a mess again. And I'm like, how did I get here when all I'm trying to do is be healthy? And so that was a really especially dark place for me because I felt like I was exercising all the tools that I had and nothing was working. And so I ended up going to like just a gynecologist to try to get some medications to mitigate some of these symptoms. And this was I begrudgingly went. I didn't want to go, but I'm like, you know what? I don't need to suffer taking medications. You're not a failure. And sometimes, we can just get things as like a crutch. So, you wouldn't tell someone like, don't use crutches because it's not healing the root cause. Like, okay, sometimes we need crutches, right? And so I went to the gynecologist and I said, listen, I think I have PCOS. I'm working out, I'm eating super healthy, but I can't lose any weight. Like, I don't know what to do. And he goes, well, you have PCOS. You have to lose weight. You have to take the pill and there's no cure. Like, okay, thank you for that fabulous interview. So he forced me to take a prescription of the pill with me out of the room. So I ripped it up when I got to my car and was thus more motivated than ever to fix this myself. So I did get a couple of medications that I did take and they did help me temporarily. So I did take metformin and spironolactone, which are commonly prescribed for PCOS. And had I known, I would have maybe been cued in that metformin is a diabetes drug. I didn't know that at the time. So I never made a connection with blood sugar, insulin, and PCOS. So I was just going about my time. And years later, still just kind of symptoms at bay, but still hadn't gotten to the root of it. And it was bothering me. So I was listening to a podcast and I heard someone say, PCOS is the diabetes of the ovaries. And I almost drove my car off the road because I was just in a state of shock hearing that because I had never considered blood sugar or insulin resistance to be something that would impact me because I didn't have diabetes. No one in my family had diabetes. So why did I have to pay attention to my blood sugar? Like, and to be honest, to be completely honest, blood sugar was boring and complicated, and I had no interest in learning about it. So I was like, let's just skip this chapter. This doesn't pertain to me. And little did I know what I didn't know was hurting me. And so what I didn't know about blood sugar was really impacting my life because so I was like, okay, I have to figure out how is this affecting me? Like I have to have symptoms then of blood sugar issues, but I don't know any symptoms of blood sugar problems. I didn't even know any symptoms of type 2 diabetes, with the exception of having amputations, because I worked in a nursing home and I saw people who they had the pink sugar packet if they had diabetes, which was the sweet and low, and they oftentimes had amputation. That's all I knew. That is all I knew about diabetes. And maybe other people know more, which is great, but I didn't. So I looked back and I was like, oh my goodness, all of these things that I thought were personality traits or like labels I had for myself, they're actually symptoms of blood sugar issues. So I was shocked to see how this was playing out. So I used to say, I don't have a sweet tooth. All my teeth are sweet. Like, because I always had sugar cravings. I used to wake up shaking in the morning and I would say, oh, it's because I'm a breakfast person. I just like to have breakfast. I used to carry granola bars with me or food with me, snacks with me whenever I left the house because I was a foodie, right? No, it was because I hated to be hungry because my hunger was actually a blood sugar crash. So
Mhm.
I was a snacker, I was a grazer, like all these little labels. And it's like, oh, those things are just symptoms of blood sugar issues. Like, who knew? I was the hangry friend. Like, again, these things are not personality traits. And it's like, whoa, who would have thought? Like, not me. I had no idea. So yeah, I started to look back and see all these things. And then I saw a lot of other symptoms, which we can get into. So eventually I was able to optimize my blood sugar and insulin, which is really what's at the root of PCOS manifesting. I did see that, like, in the PCOS literature, they'll say a lot of people with PCOS also have insulin resistance, but it's really the other way around. A lot of people with insulin resistance develop PCOS. And so you can improve the PCOS and really put it in remission by optimizing your insulin and your blood sugar. And so I did that. And now my menstrual cycles are regular. I don't know that they're coming. Like I don't break up with anybody. I'm not like a crazy person or a different person the week before my cycles. No acne, healthy weight, like all these things reversed and they've stayed reversed. So I haven't had to keep using this healing diet that I used initially. I've been able to move into like a maintenance phase. So we can talk about that as well. But and things haven't returned because I've healed deeply these root causes. So yeah, I'll let you, that was a lot. So I'll let you jump in.
So many great things you said. I felt like you were on a speech to become president at certain points. I was like getting emotional, tearing up with some of the things that you were saying because it's so relatable to see so many people, our friends, our family, our neighbors, people in our society who are so desperately struggling and they might not even see that it's related to their food. And they're going to say it's genetics, it's inevitable, it's fate, it's bad luck, and not know what to do and just keep doing the same thing because of just lack of information and misinformation too, of being led down the path of like, well, here, just take this medication and everything's going to be okay. And you had said that you ate paleo and you improved so many things and then you had PCOS. So was there something going on with your paleo diet that wasn't on par, or how did it get to the point where you're like, I'm having blood sugar issues, but I'm eating a paleo diet?
Yes, great question. And this is what I had to reflect on. Like, what is it about my version of paleo that wasn't working for me?
Like Danielle has been saying, a lot of us have eaten the wrong kinds of foods for a long period of time, and in doing so, many of us have a lot of gut issues. One of the things I've been doing these past few months that has really been helping with my gut health is taking colostrum. Colostrum is the first nutrition we receive in life as mammals that contains all of the essential and bioavailable nutrients we need to build a strong immune system and healthy gut. Colostrum can help with the maintenance of the gastrointestinal tract. Colostrum also contains antibodies that can help with the immune system, and also colostrum is known to help with glowing skin and reactivation of hair growth. The colostrum I've been using is called Armra Colostrum, and you can get 15% off your order by going to the link in the description or by going to the URL tryarmra.com/LillieKane, or you can just input the discount code LillieKane at checkout.
So when I looked back at my version of paleo, when I was eating paleo, I was like, well, this is healthy sugar. These are healthy carbs. And what I didn't realize was that not only was I still eating these healthy carbs, but I had also embraced dietary fat. And so having both of these and the quantity of carbs that I was having, I mean, I was having a half a banana blended in my iced coffee in the morning with like coconut milk and then coconut sugar. And I was also doing acai bowls and fruit smoothies and a whole sweet potato at the end of the meal and kombucha and plantain chips and Lara bars and paleo treats and raw honey and maple syrup. I mean, I was really, really doing a lot of carbohydrates that was just way too many for my physiology.
Healthy
Plus,
carbs, but
yeah,
just an overabundance of these healthy carbs.
totally. And it's just, I think that a lot of people, it's not about the dogmatic yes or no. We have to stop putting things in black and white. I mean, there are a couple of things in nutrition that are hard no's. Like for me, seed oils fall into that category, right? Those industrial seed oils, hard no. But for the most part, most things are shades of gray. And as humans, we're just trying to figure it out and simplify it for ourselves. So it's natural that we would kind of try to simplify and say, oh, this is good, this is bad, because we have to categorize these things in our head. But I invite you all to not say carbs are good or bad, but that we have to find the types and the quantity and the timing that work for us at that specific time, and keeping in mind a very important thing that this will change over our lifetime. This will change during our monthly cycle. Our amount and need for carbs will change over our lifetime based on our activity levels, our level of health. What if we're pregnant? What if we're not? We, a lot of times as humans, because we're just trying to figure this all out, we weren't born with this, innate knowing like other animals. What I really encourage people to do is not look for that one diet that is going to heal them and fix them, and then we're just going to stay on that forever and ever. That's not what it is. And most often, what we need to do is find a healing. I call these like a therapeutic healing protocol instead of like a diet. So find this therapeutic healing protocol. And then once it serves its purpose, what's really important to know is when to shift out of that and start adding in more variety and more flexibility. So for me, that looked like when I had PCOS and I found out how to like control my blood sugar, I was doing my paleo diet, eating all real foods, and I just changed my macros to get into a state of nutritional ketosis. So I basically took the sweet potato off my plate and replaced it with fat. That's basically what I did. So instead of, let's say it was like steak, broccoli, and a sweet potato, it was now steak, broccoli, and an avocado. That was it. That like that little shift and adding these healthy fats and taking away those extra carbs. And it was really like magic again, how my body just really needed that break from the carbohydrates. And it's also important to keep in mind that insulin resistance is a state of carbohydrate intolerance. So I was very insulin resistant at the time. For me, how that was manifesting in my blood sugar was that I was very hypoglycemic. So when I went to the doctor, my blood sugar was 60 or 63. I almost passed out on the street a bunch of like a couple times. I'm like, I hate fasting blood work. I'm such a breakfast person, like all righteous in I'm a breakfast person. But none of the doctors, I
Yeah.
got fasting blood work several times that year. Each time my blood sugar was in the 60s. I was so lightheaded. I was shaky. I was about to pass out, and not one doctor said anything to me about that. And I was coming, no, they were knowing that I had PCOS. They weren't concerned by this at all because they're like, oh, it's under 100, it's fine. But there was a significant problem there. So the other piece about this is that we can't wait for our doctors to catch this because they are looking for the full-blown disease to be present, and then they can give you medications. And the reason is because they're not trained, they're not paid, they're not expected to do anything but treat full blown, maybe prediabetes, maybe if you're lucky. 1 in 3 people don't know they have prediabetes, and about 40% of our population has it, which is just unreal. So they're just looking out for like, okay, some significant either prediabetes or diabetes, and then we give you metformin, we give you these other drugs to bring down your blood sugar. That's the only tool they have in their toolbox. So that's the only help that you will be able to get from them, unless you want to get your own testing and ask for some things and then take those numbers and, come see me. I'll help you figure those numbers out. But we can't wait for our doctors to catch this because they're not looking for these things. And so, yeah, kind of let that get away from me. So I'll let you jump
So
in.
you did paleo, high, we'll say high carb paleo, and saw a lot of
Yep.
improvements because now you're no longer eating lots of processed foods, you're eating whole foods, so you will inevitably see improvements. That's
Yeah.
great. Let's do the first step of like eating whole foods. Then you were still
Right.
eating too many carbohydrates at that time for your tolerable level, and so you had to cut back on the carbs, and you did more of a ketogenic approach and found a lot of healing there, and that helped with your PCOS. So then
Yep.
moving forward from that ketogenic approach, do you still maintain that ketogenic paleo diet, or how have you progressed?
I love that you asked this. You're asking great questions. And no, I do not do keto all the time now. Sometimes I'm just in ketosis because my body is really good at making ketones. It's very metabolically flexible. But there came a point in time where all of a sudden I was like, why is it that I feel like I would sever my left arm for like a couple of blueberries or like a bite of a sweet potato? It was a really different feeling than like that sugar dragon coming in my head, like, oh, we should get more chocolate or like go buy ice cream. It wasn't a craving. It wasn't this like hijacking my thoughts, kind of my physiology was driving me to make these like, you know, decisions that I didn't really want to make. It was really like my body was asking me for healthy carbohydrates. And so I listened to that and I started reincorporating some carbohydrates. I started doing some carb ups. And some of the best times to do this, if you're a cycling female, right before your menstrual cycle, so the week before and the luteal phase, can help with balancing hormones, actually. It can also help with your thyroid. Also, doing carb ups around the time of ovulation, so kind of midway through the cycle, can be super supportive. Around workouts can be really helpful. So, being deliberate, you can deliberately add some healthy whole food carbohydrates in during that time. I will say, especially for someone who has these tendencies towards PCOS, insulin resistance, just keep in mind that sugars, starches, and whey protein spike insulin the most. So when it comes to adding in carbohydrates, it may be best to stick with seasonal fruits or like carrots, beets, or something, some sort of a vegetable that's not heavy starch, because those starches are much more insulin promoting. So adding in these carb ups, now I have pulled down the fat a little bit, definitely up the protein, because I find that like my best tip ever for anyone who's struggling, and maybe your people know this, but I always say eat all your protein first. Like fill your plate, eat protein until you can't take another bite, because we have this natural set point for how much protein we need to intake. And once we get that, our body will be like, we're done. But you'll still be able to eat the other things on your plate. Like there's always room for dessert. Like you will eat a whole steak and be like, okay, there's two pieces of steak left. I just cannot have it. But you can have the broccoli. You can have some sweet potato. So going back to my just original example, you will have space for the other things. What I don't want you to do is fill up on all this fluff and like fiber and fill your stomach and then not have room for all the protein, because what will inevitably happen is that you will feel hungry before your next meal. And so what we want to do is fill up on that protein. For most people, unless they're really doing a deep healing therapeutic protocol of carnivore or have a specific need to keep certain fibers out, adding in some veggies or fruits or things for fiber, and also, some healthy carbs. All of these things can be really supportive for helping you and the healthy fats go long periods between meals, so then we don't need to snack between meals, because that is another thing that really drives higher insulin levels, are these snacking all the time, like constantly grazing and putting things in our mouth, and a bite of almonds or a couple of blueberries or a sip of a latte. We're constantly getting these little hits of insulin throughout the day if we're doing that like I used to. No judgment if this is you, because this used to be me too. And we're told to eat healthy snacks. I think the word healthy snack is an oxymoron, because I don't think snacking is inherently healthy. So the idea is that we would eat this meal with protein, fat, and fiber to help us get to the next meal. And, figuring out your own carbohydrate tolerance, putting on a continuous glucose monitor, my favorite tool for figuring out what works for you and what doesn't. Maybe you're like, wow, I do great with regular potatoes, surprisingly, but if I eat a sweet potato, I'm spiking to 200 or something. So we can find these individual differences, find the foods that work best for us, and then start to play around with what we can get away with. So it's not always that we need to be this hardcore keto carnivore all the time. The idea I feel for most people is that we want to get away with as much variety as we can because we want to be feeding that good gut bacteria, having that diversity in our gut. That's what keeps us really strong and resilient. So that's
I feel like I'm looking at a mirror of me. Now, you probably do more plants than I do, and it's mainly just because I'm more of a minimalist. So I'm not like, oh, I need to get.
I don't do a ton. I
Okay.
feel like I need to do more as well, but I'm a little lazy in the kitchen. So I try to like each time I go to the grocery store, like let's buy something I haven't. So I bought these little microgreens, like cilantro microgreens. So I'm trying to just like throw some on it. But I've sort of shied away from some plants and found that my digestion was a little bit better. And so I've been slowly adding them back in, trying to get some more diversity. And I do feel that like I'm able to tolerate more and more things. So it is a process and it is always evolving.
So for somebody who they are like listening, I have a lot of people who are listening probably who don't do any carbohydrates whatsoever, and that's fine, and that might be that part of their season right now. There's other
Mhm.
people who may be eating a lot of carbohydrates and they probably should not be at this time. So
Yeah.
I have a lot of people who come to me and they're like, Lillie, I just can't have a little bit of blueberries. I can't have just a little bit of these sweet, healthy carbs
Mhm.
without going into binge mode. What is your
Mhm.
recommendation for people who have those sugar cravings? Because maybe now
Mhm.
they're second guessing, wait, so I should be having carbs in my diet? Maybe I shouldn't be having, I don't know what I should be doing. And I have this
Mhm.
sweet tooth where if I eat something sweet, I'm going to end up binge eating. What's your advice for that person?
Yeah, that's a really great question and a really valid concern for anybody. And I just want you to always like don't let something some random person says on YouTube override your own innate knowing about your body. You are the expert on you, so don't let me, I don't know you. So don't let what I'm saying like make you second guess yourself and do something despite your gut feeling of saying like, "Oh, this just doesn't feel right for me." So always please default to your intuition. And then one thing that it reminded me of is that when I started keto, I tried to do like raspberries, very low carbohydrate fruit. The second I would have a raspberry, my sugar dragon would be like, let's get chocolate too. Let's go have some candy. It was like, come on. So I, at first, had to cut out anything that was remotely sweet. I couldn't do any of the sweeteners. So if this is you, if you are in this stage, I do really love, and this is not, medical advice, but considering doing some sort of a keto carnivore approach where your body is really burning fat for fuel and staying away from any food that would wake up your sugar dragon, right? And so staying there for a while where you feel like you're like, I am the one in control. I am in the driver's seat. My sugar dragon is asleep. He is resting. He's not involved. He's in the back seat. He's not backseat driving. That's where we want to be. You need to stay there as long as you need to be able to then potentially step out of that. There may be some gut things going on, some candida overgrowths, parasites that could also be driving these cravings. So working with someone to help the gut aspect, because if there's billions of those guys in there, these yeast and bacteria and parasites screaming for sugar, and there's only one of you, who's going to win, right? So we also need to do that with our gut and make sure that we're getting the right nutrients. So working with a practitioner here is really, really powerful because I trust me, I watched all the YouTube videos. I listened to every podcast there was, and I had to go back to nutrition school to really learn how to heal myself. And so investing in working with someone, getting some gut testing done to see if there's something there, that can be super helpful. But staying in that, let's say, keto carnivore space, and then occasionally just trying a carb up. And so maybe the sweetness of berries or fruit doesn't work for you. And maybe you say, if I have a little bit of rice, like that's fine because it ends with the rice. For me, if I do a starch, I will automatically want sugar. So it's if I do the fruit, I'm good because I got this. It's weird. So everyone has their own little things. So just knowing thyself as best as you can is really, really important. And so, you don't have to put in carbohydrates. And if you say, like you just have one bite and then it's all over and you've tried all the things, like I would probably recommend for that person to go do some deeper emotional work and say, am I using food as coping? Am I, is this like a trauma response or things? So there's all different things that we can do to try to get to the root of why we're having these cravings. But for me, it was a matter of getting really fat adapted and metabolically flexible. And that after that time that I spent doing the ketogenic diet, I am now able to moderate. And I didn't think that I would be a moderator. Like I was a have one handful of chocolate chips, finish the whole bag kind of a gal. I was like, have one chocolate and keep going back until the tray is finished kind of a person. And now it's like, I can have a bite and just leave it. Like, who am I? Like, I used to really think that that was my personality. Again, like this is fixed. This is who I am, and it's not anymore. So it's really amazing how things can really change when your physiology is set up to work for you instead of against you. Because if our blood sugar is spiking and crashing all day long, what's happening is that when it's going down really fast or if it goes too low, we are physiologically going to crave fast energy. And that fast energy is usually the form of processed carbohydrates because our brain is saying, we don't have enough energy. We need some stat. So it's not going to make you be like, oh my gosh, I'm so in the mood. I'm going to go home. I'm going to cook up my grass-fed steak and I'm going to grill some, it's not going to make you do that. It's going to say, pull in the next Starbucks right now. So that's when we are out of control or not the one in the driver's seat of our decisions because the physiology is that dip in our blood sugar that's driving us to go get more sugar. And so that's the other thing. If we're adding carbs back in, really important to wear that continuous glucose monitor so you can make sure you're not causing a giant spike. Where quantity, you can see what quantity works for me. For me, like if I were doing a sweet potato, I don't do a whole sweet potato ever anymore. Like that would just be disaster for me. But I can do like maybe a third of it and feel really satisfied. It doesn't spike me that much and I'm not crashing afterwards. I'm not craving anything after. Like that was it. So figuring out by experimenting what works for you, what quantity works for you, and then the time of the day. That's also really important. So for me, and I think for maybe the average person, our best insulin sensitivity, which would mean our best time to be tolerating carbohydrates, our body does best with utilizing them, is most often in the daytime. And that's because we're up and about and we're needing, we're working, we're solving problems, we're, doing dishes, we're doing things. We need energy and we're using up that energy. But in the evening time, as the sun is setting, our body, it's like the sun sets and insulin clocks out. So keep in mind that most people do not have very good carbohydrate tolerance in the evening. And that's because our insulin just doesn't work as well. And so what you may see is that your blood sugar will spike higher and stay elevated for longer periods of time if you have those carbs in the evening. So if I have some carbs with breakfast, my blood sugar is like flatline. It doesn't even, it's like nothing because my insulin sensitivity is so good. I'm moving around. I'm using up the fuel that I just put in my body. But if I have, that same exact meal in the evening, I will absolutely have some sort of a spike and my blood sugar will stay elevated because I'm just, sitting on the couch or chill, like, chilling, right? And so thinking about the timing of our meals, really important for our insulin sensitivity. In general, rule of thumb, we want to eat when the sun is out. Eating outside is even better. Like when UV hits our skin, actually our gut bacteria changes to be better able to digest simple sugars. So thinking about the circadian aspect and the circannual, like the yearly rhythms of the sun, having higher sugar foods is actually more biologically appropriate when there's more sun outside. So thinking about eating more seasonally and locally, that's a higher harder concept because now our grocery stores are just filled with things from like Peru and California and Costa Rica and whatever. And it's like we don't even know what's in season. So this is something I'm working on for myself. I've not even close to perfection with, but this is one of my aims. And I encourage people to try not to feel perfectionistic about this, consistency over perfection every time. I'm a Enneagram 1, recovering perfectionist, all the things. So I'm just trying to do the best I can and encourage people to do the same. That, aiming for these local seasonal foods as best we can is also going to give the best information to our body because food is light information, and that is really important for how we digest and metabolize things as well.
Mhm. And you had said that you were an abstainer and then you became a moderator. And I think this is important for people to hear because oftentimes, like you said, we get fixated on the label of like, this is who I am. I am an abstainer. That means
I am carnivore. Like I am, yeah.
and I'm never going to change, right? So
Yeah.
I've had people ask me, they said, hey, I would like to be like you, Lillie, where you're a moderator. Like, will I ever be able to get to that because I am an abstainer? And I say, yes, of course you can. I've seen so many people who have been able to become moderators. And so I'm glad that you were able to say that because I feel like most of my life I've been a moderator. And so to have somebody come on and say, yep, I have been able to make that transition to be a moderator, that is probably empowering for other people to hear like, okay, cool. I know that certain people, they may have to do no sugar, low carb for only 6 months, and then they become a moderator. And then other people, they have to go 5 years being an abstainer and not having any sugar, and then they can become a moderator. And so there's no rush, and like you said, you kind of just had this instinctual thing about you where it wasn't, oh, she's addicted to carbohydrates and that's why her body said you should have some blueberries. It's like, no, I think my body is just now saying that it's time. And I guess certain people, they are very strong gung-ho that they like never want to have a carb again, and that's fine if that works for them. But aside from social pressures, I suppose, like it looks a little bit more normal if you have some potato or some sort of carby food on your plate. So you may want to become a moderator because of social pressures, but other than social pressures, did you think that there was going to be anything wrong with your health long term if you didn't incorporate some sort of carbohydrates?
Yeah, absolutely. And I was starting to see negative effects of over ketoing and over fasting. And I just really want people to know that this can be an issue and that it's like, look for these signs where you start to get this backsliding of all the benefits. So my hair started thinning. I would get really, really cold when I was fasting. Like I'd be like shaking and my feet were freezing. And I was like, I think I'm messing up my thyroid. Like, I think this is too much. And it just comes a point where let's put it in perspective. What is a ketogenic diet? A ketogenic diet or a state of nutritional ketosis is a state that human beings naturally get in when food is scarce. So for 2 years, I was sending my body a message that food is scarce. And it is a hormetic stressor, can be a hormetic stressor where our body adapts and gets stronger because we put this little pressure on it to be like, ooh, we have to do this. And then it will upregulate certain things. But that's like saying, oh, exercise is good, so I'm never going to stop exercising. No, like exercise is good up until a certain point, and then it will have deleterious effects. Same thing with carnivore, keto, and fasting. These are all tools, in my opinion. And what will start to happen is that you'll just see that backsliding of effects. So you might start gaining weight. You might start feeling more tired. It's like, I thought I just got rid of this. And then what are you going to think? Oh, I just have to keto
Carnivore
harder,
harder, yeah.
carnivore harder. Maybe I'll just do beef and salt. And it's like, maybe your body needs more diversity. Maybe you need a change. You are not a failure if you start eating carbs again. Carbs are not bad if you eat them in the quantity that does your body good, right? The type of carbs matter, the timing, the quantity, all of these things matter. But having a little bit of carb before doing a workout might be amazing. Maybe that's the balance you find. Whatever works for you. And it might take some experimenting to figure that out. But the idea that we have to stay in this state, like that's why I never put keto next to my name,
Same. I had to
because
do the same
I
thing.
did,
Yep.
yeah, because I didn't want to do what I did with paleo, where it's like, okay, I am paleo, so how can I fix this? And it was like only within that framework. If you are only using one framework, you are blinded to potential other solutions. And keeping in mind that our thyroids can do better sometimes with carbohydrates, that our menstrual cycle, if we're sending a signal to our body that it is perpetual winter, is
Mhm.
it going to give us optimal fertility? Probably for a short time, it can. Like my cycle came back and my I didn't have PMS anymore. So the reduction in carbs for a period of time really helped my hormones. But had I kept going, like you start to see negative effects. So find the peak effectiveness and then adapt and change. And like, yeah, and there's a great book, Tara Garrison, a good friend of mine, she wrote a book called Short Term Keto. And so she's got great information in there about like some of these symptoms that might pop up and how to do some carb ups and things like that. So just, one resource for you guys because, I'm not the only one saying this. Lillie, you're not the only one saying this, that it's not a failure to not do keto anymore. And the idea that, if you're a cycling female, doing keto in the first 2 weeks of your cycle and then maybe not doing keto in the second 2 weeks or something like that, like you can cycle it in. And so thinking about, cycling females, we have a 30-day rhythm. Men have a 24-hour rhythm. You guys can do whatever you want. But even postmenopausal women, still benefit from that monthly cycle, and you can do it with the moon. So you can like maybe a week before the full moon you are, or the new moon or whatever, you're cycling in carbs, or maybe every weekend you step out of ketosis. Our body doesn't always want the exact same thing, so being really in tune with it to know, I think I've been doing too many carbs and I'm just going to do a couple of weeks of keto to reset. Great, or like my gut needs a reset. I went on vacation and I think a week of, a couple weeks of carnivore is what I'm feeling called to.
Yep.
Amazing, right? But like, so use these things as tools. Like keto is a tool, carnivore is a tool, fasting is a tool. And please, for the love of God, ladies, please do not skip breakfast. This is just something that I see constantly, and I see it works at the beginning and then it doesn't. And it drives a lot of leptin resistance, which often precedes insulin resistance. It drives hunger. So if you want to fast, skip dinner instead. Wake up, nourish your body, eat within an hour of the sunrise, get outside, see the sun first thing. This is an amazing thing you can do for your hormones. We want to sync with the cycle of nature. And so we want to be in alignment with those rhythms. And so if we use the rhythms like, oh, it's peach season and I live in Georgia. Like, let's have peaches, like, so thinking about what is the earth giving us at different times, I mean, that's really where the money is. So maybe in winter, it is more biologically appropriate to do bone broths and stews and lots of meats and animal foods. And then when the spring comes, there's new produce and like dipping into that. I see that as being like, if we can follow what the earth is doing, it's probably going to be the best for us because the closer we can sync ourselves to nature, the better. So.
Yeah, I love everything that you said. I posted a video here recently about why, like, kind of the pros and cons to fasting, and it was like not very popular. Like, I didn't read the comments because I was like, I could just see based on like the like percentage that people were like not having it because people become so like, yes, fasting it's great and it has its place. So I was saying these are the pros. These are who should do it. These are what the benefits I experience. These are the cons. These are why people should stay away in these situations. This is why I don't do it anymore. And people were taking it as an attack on like, I'm saying you should never do fasting. It's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. No, there's an appropriate place for it. Here's the pros, here's the cons. And even with carbs, we're not saying that people should never have carbs, should have tons of carbs. We're just saying there's different seasons in people's lives where they could see benefits in different areas with different amounts of carbs. Like I'm pretty sure you don't do a high carb diet. I don't do a high carb diet, but even insinuating having some carbs to people who have zero carbs seems like a lot. Like, do you know how many carbs you have in a day?
I never track
Okay.
ever. And it's really kind of intuitive. Some days I'm higher carb, some days I'm lower carb. When my cycle's coming, I'm like, oh, I think I'm going to deliberately have a couple more carbs than normal. And yeah, it's really intuitive, but I would say I definitely still fall in that lower carb category because that's how I definitely feel better. Yeah. So I don't even know. And the other thing is like I don't really post too much of what I do because I don't want people copying me because I am the only person who's at the exact spot on my journey that I'm on. So everyone's at a different spot. So I encourage people to figure out what works for them and work with a coach or a nutritionist or someone who can help you figure that out if you are struggling to figure it out, and that's okay if you are. But use the tools, use the continuous glucose monitor, and really maybe just keep a little notebook or a note in your phone of I ate this meal, this is how I feel. I tried this carb up and this is what's happening for me. Like, did it make you crave? Did it make you more tired? Maybe it was the wrong time. Maybe you need to do more activity afterwards. Like, there's all sorts of potential possibilities. And so if you're encouraged to try to start adding back in carbs because, your hair is thinning or you lost your cycle or you're gaining weight or like you just are hitting a plateau, then I encourage you to try it and feel free to reach out or to Lillie, to myself if you're struggling.
In the description, you'll find links to Danielle's Instagram, YouTube, and website, Danielle Hamilton Health, as well as her podcast, Unlock the Sugar Shackles. Don't be silly, subscribe to Lillie, and I'll see you in the next one.